holding a Ph.D. in Surface Electroanalytical Chemistry, blending physics, chemistry, electronics, computing, and mathematics. Dr. Frank has over 60 peer-reviewed publications, including cover articles in Science and other leading journals, and a Nobel Prize nomination. Dubbed the Johnny Appleseed of Election Reform, Dr. Frank has worked in 48 states. And I might add, he dropped everything and has done just this for the last 5 years. So we really appreciate that. Uncovering election algorithms and testifying in legal settings. Using data and statistics, he reveals startling patterns and anomalies, from statistical impossibilities to thousands of phantom voters. With sharp insights and engaging style, Dr. Frank is bringing his groundbreaking research to Alabama. So please welcome Dr. Douglas Frank.
I like Alabama, and I like the team that I have here, Bob and Susan and Kimberly and Suzanne and Anna and Joe. You guys are awesome. I work in a lot of states, and the biggest weakness I find is that you don't have good leadership teams. And this state, you have a great leadership team. I was telling Bob in the car who's been driving me around that I wish I had a leadership team like you guys in every state. I'd be a lot more ahead. Seems like we're always pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. It's a lot of work. The public is apathetic. The people are complacent. They become disengaged. And they don't understand what's going on. So the first part of my work is to wake people up. I call it red pilling them. You expose what the problem is. Most people don't even know what the problem is. And then once I tell them what the problem is, they're like, oh my goodness, what do we do? And how do we fix this? And then there's a whole set of mistakes that people make at that point. And so the advantage of me is that I've been doing this for 5 years, so I already made all those mistakes. So listen to me and don't repeat my mistakes, okay? And I've got a strategy I'll describe to you a little bit that I've been implementing state by state. And one of my favorite things about Alabama is you guys are unspoiled territory. When I go to a place like Georgia or Arizona or Michigan, the election integrity groups there are stuck in a rut on the wrong path. And it's difficult for me to wake them up and get them realigned in an effective direction. Whereas here I have virgin territory. It's good clean start. And I'm very optimistic. And by the time I'm finished my presentation, that says 1:13 on it.
1 hour.
Oh, gotcha. So that's my. I was hoping I could talk till 1:13. God gave me a lot of gifts, but you know, if you read in Matthew 24 when Jesus talks to the people there, he says, you know, the more gifts he gives you, the more he expects, and he reaps where he doesn't sow. So I have my work cut out for me. So the more gifts he gives, the more we have to give. But anyway, let me just kind of get going here. I think it's enough rambling. This is an image of the dome in the state of Wisconsin. I've been in multiple states. My two favorite capitals are Missouri and Wisconsin. They've got amazing capitol buildings. I've been in yours. It's not as interesting. It's good, but it's not as good. But this has it's a huge. There are 200,000 pieces of glass in this mosaic. It's up in the dome, and it's a picture of Lady Liberty. And you notice that Lady Liberty there is pointing at heaven, because that's the inspiration for our liberty. The whole idea, the whole experiment that God did when he created the universe was he set up creatures with volition. And liberty is a big deal. We serve God out of our free will, out of our choice, unless you're Calvinist. But anyway, I am in a Baptist church, right? So anyway, I was a Southern Baptist music minister for 20 years, so I know how that works. But you notice that she's pointing towards heaven, so that's the inspiration for our liberty. That's the inspiration that we founded our country on, that we wanted to have a place where we were the kings, that we were the sovereigns. And then with her other hand, Lady Liberty is defending the ballot box, because that's how we protect our liberty. And what's happened in America is we have forgotten that we have to defend our liberty. we're relying on other people to defend our liberty instead of us. And institutions like groups like Eagle Forum and whatnot understand that and been fighting for our liberty and fighting for these issues. So I think that that's a really good introduction. We have to resume our civil responsibility to defend our elections. Now, I'm just going to tell you, people always say to me, oh, Dr. Frank, how do I get more information? And I always say, did you take a picture of this slide at the beginning or not? And they say, no. And they say, well, I wish you had. So get your camera out and take a picture of this slide. And then that way later, when you didn't take a picture of this slide and you ask me for information, I can say, you didn't take a picture, did you, right? So take a picture and then you'll know how to get a hold of me. My email's right there at the bottom, and how to track what I'm doing. I post a lot of stuff up here, and I posted a lot of the data that I'm going to show you today on my YouTube channel so that you can get it. And so whatever county you are from in this state, I've put graphs up for your county already. So you can go to the YouTube channel and download, make nice screenshots of your data from your county. All right, I still see a couple of cameras up, so I'm just kind of rambling a little bit. They're about to disappear. Okay, good. All right. So now, if you didn't take a picture and you want to contact me, you have to talk to somebody who did take a picture. All right, here we go. All right, so I'm glad to be there. I already got to that already. So anyway, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Becky, it's an honor to speak to you guys. I'm a fan of Eagle Forum as well. One of the videos I put up, I mentioned on YouTube, I've shown you the historical graphs for every county in your state. It was interesting. Yesterday, I won't use names, but I was sitting in a county meeting with a registrar yesterday, and I showed her the data for her own county, and literally her mouth just went. Your registrars don't even know what's happening to them. They don't understand. And the reason is because, as Bob pointed out, the voter rolls aren't being maintained locally. They are being maintained in Omaha, Nebraska. And your clerks, when they want to add somebody, as Bob pointed out, they don't go to their own precinct books or go to their own Excel spreadsheet and add somebody to the rolls or remove somebody from the rolls. When they want to work on the voter rolls, they log into Omaha, Nebraska and add and remove people that way. And they don't really know what's really going on in the background to their voter rolls. And when I show them, they are shocked. I have copies of their voter rolls, multiple copies, and Suzanne has been working closely with me on that in your states, and we can show you that. The other thing is that I was here in 2021. I met with John Merrill on 2 different occasions. Mr. Lindell and I flew in. We were going around the country collecting signatures from secretaries of states to do a Supreme Court case. And we showed John Merrill my results, and I've summarized them here. You can go to my Rumble channel and see that. All I have to do is look at one county in a state, and I can predict every other county in the state. I can tell you how many 18-year-olds, how many 19-year-olds, how many 20-year-olds, all the way up to 110 years old. I can tell you in every county in a state how many voters there were going to be by just looking at one county. And that was a suspicious outcome. And it was the way I proved in early 2020, actually in 2020, December 2020, it's how I proved that the elections were being centrally manipulated, centrally controlled, even before I knew how they were being centrally controlled. I proved statistically they had to be, and then we found out later how they were, and it's through the voter rolls. You know, your clerks, your registrars, they think that they're in control of their elections. And if you talk to them, they will tell you that, but they're wrong. And so one of my first jobs is I sit down with them and I red pill your clerks, I red pill your registrars, and they're shocked to discover they think they're in control, but they don't even total their elections. What do? The tabulators that Bob was describing, they take that flash drive out of there. They're not adding anything up, they're carrying a flash drive from this point to this point, and they plug the flash drive into a computer, and it's not even added up there in the computer. Those numbers are uploaded to where? Omaha, Nebraska, where the tabulation takes place. So it's like, and I'll show you an image of this later, but there's nothing happening local where you can police it and you can audit it. It's all being done somewhere else. This is a crazy, let me say it differently. This is a stupid way to run your elections. So stop doing it this way, okay? It's time for you to wake up and to control your elections. Get back in control. Now, what I've been doing is going around state to state and starting these teams, 7 steps teams I call them. I'll talk about that in a little bit, in order to in order to empower you. Because it's not just enough for me to wake you up, red pill you, and show you what's wrong. You need something to do. You need a strategy. You need an action plan. And one of the things I love about the leadership team here in your state is they're already on one part of the action plan. They're already teaching people how to hand count. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that and the strengths and weaknesses of that. Another thing is they hosted me and Chris Ann Hall on a national call for Cause of America. It was an excellent presentation, I think. I love Chris Ann Hall. She's awesome. She polices me all the time. I like it when people take me to task. I'm not afraid of criticism. In fact, I'm better because of it. And one of my favorite things, she always criticizes me. She says, Dr. Frank, stop saying constitutional rights. There are God-given natural rights enumerated in the Constitution. She says when you say constitutional rights, you give people the impression that their rights come from the Constitution. Wrong. There are God-given natural rights. They're just enumerated in the Constitution. And I agree with her in principle, and just a lot of words to say. So if I hear you say, if you hear me say constitutional rights, you know I mean God-given natural rights enumerated in the Constitution. Except, of course, if voting, voting isn't a God-given right. God's ideal government is a benevolent dictatorship where he's the king, right? Just ask Samuel, right, the prophet in the Old Testament. That's God's idea of government. We don't have the God-given right to vote. That is a constitutional right. So it is a little gray there, but anyway, well, forgive me on that. But that presentation is also up on my YouTube channel. So as I mentioned, my job is to red pill you, so I'm going to do that first. I'm going to wake you up and show you what's going on in your state, and then I'm going to give you a plan and, show you some of your own data. I could talk for hours. God made me this way. It's dangerous, I know. But I'm going to try to squeeze it all into one presentation. All right. So in the early days, in 2021, we were spending a lot of time showing that the machines were vulnerable, showing that the machines were the problem. And that's because Mr. Lindell, that's kind of his pet peeve. And he's a great patriot, a great man. I love him. I spent many hours with him in his plane flying around the country. It's kind of fun, zoom, land on the tarmac and get in an SUV and drive and meet with the Secretaries of State. That's what we were doing with John Merrill. I'll just tell you about that day just for a second. So we met with John, and I showed him that I could predict all of his counties to 0.999 accuracy correlation coefficients, and he had no answer for me. And Mr. Lindell said, well, we want a copy of the voter rolls, and John said, well, those are going to be $30,000. So Mr. Lindell just took out his checkbook and wrote him a check right there. That's when Mr. Lindell had money. Now he's pretty broke and in pretty bad shape, because in those days we thought all we had to do was show people the evidence. And Mr. Lindell has the electronic evidence. He has recordings of your machines online during the elections. Your tabulating machines. He has recorders of that. And so we would show that to Secretaries of State, and we would bring a white hat hacker with us, and we would hack into their elections right in front of their faces. I liked Bob's slide. Great presentation, Bob, wherever you went. He showed the hardened laptop that the Secretary of State uses. That is such a funny phrase to me. I'm a computer dweeb. I'm one of the first 300 people on the internet. I teach computer programming classes. There's no such thing as a hardened device. Everything is hackable. The military can't even secure their stuff, and they spend billions of dollars on it. It's funny for me to hear Secretaries of State say, oh yeah, we're the gold standard. Okay, I'll just tell you one short story, just to give you a feeling. I was with the Secretary of State of Louisiana, Kyle Ardoin, who also says that their system was the gold standard. They all say that. Everybody says their election system is the gold standard. And he says, oh no, Dr. Frank, ours is really secure. He says, I tracked the election right during the election, right here on my cell phone. Okay, this is what we're dealing with. Okay, it's kind of a crazy thing. But anyway, so I met with Mr. Merrill, and I met with him twice, and back in 2021, and it's pretty symptomatic of what we see around the country. None of the Secretaries of State want to change the system. The Republican Party doesn't want to change the system. Your legislature doesn't want to change the system because your legislators and your parties like feeling during the election like they know what's going on and that they can kind of control the outcome. They say, oh, Dr. Frank, we like having early voting because then we know, I know you don't have it here, but this is what I hear. We like having it early because then we know who to contact who hasn't voted yet. Well, if you know who to contact who hasn't voted yet, the bad guys know. And they cheat and you don't. So any information that you're giving to the public that makes your election results known ahead of time is bad. You're giving away information to the people who want to cheat. You won't want to have any. You want to have an election completely opaque until the polls close, and then you want an election completely transparent afterwards. Everybody can see everything. You don't want anybody to know anything, who's voted, what the tallies are, nothing until the polls close. Anyway, you get the point. I think I've rambled on enough. But I don't usually talk about machines, but I just have to say at least one thing, because you guys have the most hackable machines in the country. Okay, you use the ES&S tabulators, and this is public. This was an article that was published in 2020. Politico magazine reported on the fact that ES&S had shipped machines all across the country, 33,000 of them, the ones you use, with modems in it. And it was brought to the attention of the EAC. Suzanne mentioned the EAC. That's the Election Assistance Commission. That's the federal agency that regulates this. It was brought to the attention of EAC that you guys have these machines that are illegal. It's illegal to use tabulating machines that can connect to the internet. It's illegal, and these can. And it was brought to the attention, and ES&S said, oh, no, don't worry about that. We've turned those modems off. Oh, how did you turn them off? With a password. Well, who has the password? Well, we do. ES&S has them, and the Secretary of State has them, and so does Dr. Frank. Okay, they didn't say that, but that's the case. The passwords are out there. They're easy to get, actually. And it's fun because a lot of times I'll sit with Secretaries of States and we'll hack into their machines right in front of their faces. And you would think that would be sufficient for them to say, oh, we have a problem. Nope, that is not sufficient. I've been down that route. I've testified to multiple legislatures on television, formal. It's not sufficient. I've learned that approach is the wrong approach. That your machines have a telnet modem, and we can go into that. But I just don't really want to talk about that because I've learned that talking about the machines doesn't get us anywhere. What happens is people say, okay, so what? The machines are hackable, but was there any hacking? You end up needing to show the harm, that actually something happened. And then once you've shown that something actually happened, then you have to have a plan to address it. And so I've kind of migrated away from that. It doesn't mean that it isn't a problem. It is. Every part of the election is a problem. So just a little bit about me so you kind of know who I am and you'll understand where I'm going with this. I was conceived in Shasta County, Northern California. And my parents were college students there. My mom was the science prize winner. This is their yearbook. She was the chemistry prize winner, and my father was the class president. So now you know where I get my science from my mom, and I get my big mouth from my dad. And he has a funny first name. It's Giwana. It's Cherokee Indian. It means big black horse. So I have more Cherokee blood than that woman has. It means big black horse, and it's hard to say Giwana. So that Douglas G. Frank, when you see the G, that's Giwana. Just call me Stud. It's easier than big black horse. Anyway, so I was conceived up there. I was raised on an Angus ranch in Northern California, so I know what hard work is. And there's something about working close to nature that's really healthy for a young person. And I grew up that way, and I have good values, I think, because of that. I discovered Feynman, the physicist, Richard Feynman, when I was after 8th grade, and I read his lectures on physics, and I've been a physicist ever since. I went to Southern California. I went to school in Southern California, went to Westmont College, Christian Liberal Arts School, got my bachelor's in chemistry there, already started publishing, and got my Ph.D. University of California, Santa Barbara. Then we moved out to California. I married my high school sweetheart. We've been married 43 years now. We have 3 beautiful kids. As mentioned in my bio, I have 60 scientific peer-reviewed publications, cover articles on the leading journals in the world. It's important I say that, not to brag, but you need to know I'm a real scientist. I'm the real deal. I have a Nobel Prize nomination in chemistry from my discoveries. Okay, I'm real. it gives me credibility, right? I'm not just a wackadoodle. I'm not just a conspiracy wingnut. I actually have evidence, and I actually know what I'm doing with numbers. That's my specialty. I live out in Amish country now, not too far from Springfield. You all heard about Springfield during the debates, right? Because that's where, they eat the pets and all that stuff. Remember that? That was pretty funny. It was a problem for us because the animals were all emigrating into our community. We were being overrun. But that problem's been resolved now that Trump is in office. We're all in good shape now. So the thing to understand about me is that I'm a modeler. And what is a modeler? A modeler is somebody who gathers large amounts of data and then finds mathematical and computer models that predict that or describe that. And then you use those models to make predictions. And that's kind of like my core that's how I think. That's how I work. So since I was in college in the late 70s, early 80s, I've been modeling. I've modeled every presidential election since 1980. I predicted every one of them correctly. Even 2016, I predicted Trump was going to be the president 13 months in advance when there were 17 people in the primary. And I showed everybody the math. I said, this is 2-to-1 odds Trump's going to be president. I predicted every one of them correctly until 2020. So that was a surprise to me, and I couldn't understand. The odds were 20-to-1 that Trump was going to get a second term. So that kind of threw me for a loop. And I know why I failed now, because they cheated, and I didn't predict the cheating. I was predicting the election. So that's an important thing about me. I'm a modeler. I model climate. I model sunspots. I model population. I model abortion. And I noticed reading your little pamphlet there that you guys are strong on that issue. The reason I'm talking to you about modeling a little bit is because I want you to understand how I think, and I want you to be able to walk away with some useful numbers. So, for example, on the issue of abortion, right now in America, for every 5 pregnancies, one ends in an abortion. Okay, that's higher than most people realize. Since we've legalized abortion with Roe v. Wade originally, since then, if you cut the country in half, right, draw a line right in the middle of America, and eliminated everybody left of center, that's how many people we've killed with abortion in America. It's much more than you think. And if you went to 3 households in America, 3 average households, 2 of them would have another family member right now, except for the amount of abortion. So what did I do? I just took a lot of numbers and I gave you some simple ways to describe them to you. It kind of exposes how big the problem is and how relevant it is to you. It's quite an issue. It's 2 out of 3 households would have another family member. Think about that. That's a huge effect that it's had. Right now, chemical abortion is about 2/3 of all abortions, and the abortion rate in America has shot up dramatically since Roe v. Wade was overturned, and people don't even know that. I have a whole presentation I give on that. I talk about climate change. I talk about God and science. I have somebody said, Dr. Frank, you need to change your motto to, instead of, follow the data with Dr. Frank, you need to change your motto to, I have a graph for that, because I like to gather data and then show you a graph that teaches you how to think about it. And I don't just look at the surface things, I like to get to the bottom of things. I show you what's going on with the core. I can tell you how long you're going to live. I was just talking about abortion and life expectancy. I model climate. I model population. It's crazy. I'll tell you one more example, and then I'll jump into elections, just so you know. Yeah, don't listen to the hot air you hear on the media about climate change. I'm about to update my models, by the way. I predicted a year ago what the global temperature was going to be. And I'm dead on, exactly correct. I predicted it a year ago. It's like an obsession for me, modeling. But anyway, I modeled COVID. During COVID-19, I had 150,000 people following me every week on my websites to figure out, I was telling you how many people were going to die in every county in America. And that's a whole nother story. So I talked about vaccines. I happen to be an expert on vaccines. God doesn't waste anything. Everything that God invests in you, He expects a return on. And it's crazy. I was going around the country for years lecturing on vaccines, and we all know how that turned out with the COVID vaccines. All right. But one more thing, and then I'll move on because I'm in a church. I do talk about science and faith because I'm a real Christian as well. I'm a real scientist, but I'm a real Christian, and people are confused by that in our modern culture. I'm not in the least bit confused about that. All you got to do is read Newton, Copernicus, and Galileo, and Kepler, and Faraday, and Boyle, and Pascal. Just go ahead and read what those scientists actually wrote. They were devout Christians, and it's really exciting to go around the country teaching people about that. But also it's fun as a Christian for me to read the Bible from a scientific perspective. So if you want to have me back sometime to talk about that, that's a lot of fun. I enjoy those talks. I'm doing one next week in Kentucky, and I'll give you a little flavor. So I like thinking about Jesus from a scientific perspective. I could go for hours on that, but I'm just going to talk about one thing. So his first miracle, when he made water into wine, everybody kind of just goes right past that one. And I'm like, slow down, slow down. For him to make water into wine, water is H2O, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen, 18 grams per mole. Okay, and to make that into wine, ignoring the minerals, you got to have a 14% ethanol solution, and that's C2H5OH. You got to have carbon atoms. You started with oxygen and hydrogen. Where did you get the carbon atoms? Well, you had to have done a nuclear reaction. That's not just a chemical reaction. And as you do the calculation, it's actually 4 Hiroshima bombs worth of nuclear energy required for that miracle. And everybody always just thinks, oh, big deal, water into wine. That's a huge miracle. That's 4 Hiroshima bombs worth of energy. You know, people get all tripped out about raising somebody from the dead. That's nothing. Somebody dies, you wake them up, that's nothing. There's nothing to that. Water into wine, now that's a big miracle, okay? So anyway, you can tell I have fun with that. So I like introducing people to the idea that to think about Scripture from a scientific perspective. So anyway, have me back for that. I think I've kind of given you a flavor of who I am and what I do. I like taking lots of data, analyzing it, and presenting it in a simple way that people can understand, and I keep it fun. I try to keep it fun. All right, so let me jump ahead here. Let me get going here, get serious here. All right, so what happened is I got my start in Pennsylvania after the December 2020 election. President Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania asked for an audit, and I was part of the team that audited their election in Pennsylvania, and that woke me up. I had no idea there was so much fraud in our elections. So my first lesson, my first waking up moment was that there's a lot of fraud in our elections. The second waking up moment is that a Republican majority legislature didn't want to fix it. In fact, because Doug Mastriano, a medal-winning war hero, asked for an audit, the Republican majority legislature took away his budget and his staff and his office and took him off of every committee. I mean, that was another big eye-opener to me, because I thought Republicans were the good guys and Democrats were the bad guys, and that is not the case. And you should see your own legislature here in Alabama. I've got a graph for that. And I can show you how badly they vote, okay? Maybe I will show you that graph, okay? But anyway, it's in here. I'll show you. I saw there were some legislators here, and let's hope they're the good guys. You've got a few good ones, but you've got a lot of bad ones. It's not what you think. But anyway, I could go on and on about that, but it's how I got started. And then Mr. Lindell discovered my work, and he did a video about it. It was his second documentary. It was called Scientific Proof. It's a 1-hour-long video. And what happened was now suddenly 10 million people knew who I was in about a week. And everybody started asking me, gee, Dr. Frank, there's a problem in our elections. Will you please come and help? And so I started traveling the country helping people. And at the time, I thought it was only going to be 6 months, because certainly if I show you the evidence and I show the leaders the evidence and I show the legislatures the evidence, they're going to all go, oh no, we have a huge problem, we got to fix it. Obviously. And here I am 5 years later. I remember telling my beautiful wife, hey honey, I'm going to set aside my income for 6 months. We're going to save the country and then I'll be back to work. You know, that's 5 years ago. And what I discovered is that our country is in way worse shape than I ever imagined. And we're not just politically corrupt and politically depraved, we're spiritually corrupt and spiritually depraved. And we need revival in both categories. And so that's what I'm working on. So anyway, that made me famous. Then the president discovered my work, and I got to be his keynote speaker for his first rally after he was out of office. And he said, Dr. Frank, explain to the world how they stole my election. And so I got to get up and explain to 21,000 people right there and millions online across the world how they stole our elections. So that got me connected early on to key people, and I do have some inside information, Bob. When your question asks, is what's going to happen? Yeah, 2026, get ready, guys. If you're not preparing for that, you're stupid. It's coming. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be, 2026 is a serious turning point in our country. I'll just hint at what the problem is. In 2018, you remember he lost the midterms. Well, and he started with a 40 majority. And he's got, 4 right now in the House? What's the first thing that the House is going to do? They're going to want to impeach him. Do you think that Trump is going to let that stand? No. And he even wrote some executive orders to empower what he's about to do. So anyway, get ready. There's going to be a big mess. So you can either wait for it to happen, wait for the hurricane to hit, or you can prepare. And I think Bob's dead on right. I think you need to prepare. So get ready. All right. After that talk, people recognized that I'm good at math, and so they said to make math great again. I've been traveling the country teaching people. I've given over 1,000 presentations like this now around the country, and I'm waking people up, getting them involved. So I got this nickname, the Johnny Appleseed of Election Integrity. Now, let me just jump right into some data for you. I think I've given you enough rambling on. Let me ask the question rhetorically. What's wrong with our elections? So Bob showed you a good slide where there are all these opportunities for fraud and manipulation in our election, and he's dead on right. I always tell people there are about a dozen ways we can cheat. Our elections are being cheated. But what's the core problem with all that? The core problem with all that, people say, well, we got to get rid of the machines or whatever. And I need to change the way you think about that. It's not just the machines. It's not just hand counting. It's not just the rolls. It's not just these symptoms, these components. The key problem is that in every state in America now, and I mean every state, and I've done the math, in every state, elections are now centrally controlled by the state. What did Bob tell you? He said, where are your voter rolls? Your voter rolls aren't even here. They're in Omaha, Nebraska. Okay, think about that. And your votes aren't even tabulated here. They're tabulated in Omaha. You're so centrally controlled, it's not even in your state. That's crazy. Why are you running your elections that way? Like I said before, that's stupid. Stop doing that. All right. So, but the problem is that's compromised our constitutional voice. We, the people, we've lost our constitutional voice. So here's the way to think about the current situation. When I was in college, we had the central computer, the VAX computer. I don't know, some of you might remember those days when they had the VAX computer. And then around campus, they had all these dumb terminals, we called them, because they didn't do anything. They didn't have any memory, they didn't have any computing. All they did was connect to the central computer. That's where the data and the equations and the files, everything were there. And people would log in to that central computer to do anything. That's where the smarts were, but nothing really happened out here. That was called dumb terminals. And that's exactly the way your elections are being run. It's the same principle. Your clerks, your registrars, and I'm not insulting their intellect, they're dumb terminals. There's nothing happening locally. All the software, all the tabulation, all the maintenance is being done centrally. And where is that central location? It's in Omaha, Nebraska in your case. It's crazy that that's happening. But your own clerks don't even know this is what the situation is. So a lot of times I sit down with them and I have to show them. And when they see that that's the situation, they're shocked. All right, so let me give you an overview of Alabama. Quickly, and then I will zoom into a county or two and show you what the problem is and what the solution is, and maybe we'll have some time for some questions. I see I've got 42 minutes left. I'm doing pretty well, I think. So this top graph, I have a graph for that, remember? This is the number of voting age people in the state of Alabama since about 1980 to present. And you can see the voting age people was about 3 million back then, and now you're up to about 4 million. Looks like there are a couple of little glitches because those are census corrections. But that's basically the population in the state of Alabama, voting age population. Then this graph, these data are from your Secretary of State website. It's the official number of people registered for every election every 2 years. And so you'll notice that's why it's kind of a little jerky, because it's every 2 years how many people on the rolls. And I would tell you from my experience and my national experience in elections is that your voter rolls were clean during this period of time. So up to about 2010 or so, your voter rolls were clean. If your voter rolls have about 70% of your voting age population in it, that's a clean voter rolls. And you can see that that's the case. But then something happened here right around 2010. Your voter rolls started shooting up. And you'll notice that now, if they hadn't had a correction in the census, you'd have more people in your voter rolls than you have people available. That's a problem, right? But a lot of times people say, well, that doesn't mean they're dirty. Well, you're right. Actually, you're about 30% dirty. It's not whether you got past your population. You should be around 70%. That's a good, clean voter rolls. Well, how did that happen? Well, this is the point in time where your state said to your local registrars, we're taking the rolls away from you. We're now going to centrally manage them. Until then, your local people were actually managing your own rolls. That's when they lost control. Now the state, as of that point, the state had control of the rolls. And one of the first things they started doing is adding everybody who gets a driver's license. Everybody who gets a driver's license. You want to know why you have 3,100 and some odd non-citizens in your rolls acknowledged by your government? Because non-citizens get driver's licenses and they get slapped in there. Or if they get welfare, they're automatically put in. Or if they get touch any government institution, if you go to jail, you get put in the voter rolls, okay? In other words, any government organization automatically, if you touch one, automatically puts you in. So that's why the voter rolls suddenly started shooting up. So you can just see that. And I'm going to show you that for every county. I could talk about the turnouts too, but I'm going to save that for another day. But I have that for every county. In principle, if we bring that blue line down, that population down, in principle, you got about 40% too many people in your voter rolls. About 40% too many people. And anybody who's knocked on doors during campaigns and used those lists, you've noticed those, and I got it, lots of nods. Anybody who's done that knows those things are horrible. Those voter rolls are a disaster. So you know I'm not making this up. It's legitimately a problem. So someone might say, well, who cares if the rolls are dirty? Big deal. So what? The rolls are dirty. You got to realize that all those extra names in the rolls are like a credit line. Every one of those names can be used to cast a ballot. Even if the people themselves are not casting that ballot, somebody else can use those names. So that's the first bad thing about having dirty voter rolls. The second bad thing about it is that, and I'll talk about this in a minute, is if this is 100% of your rolls and here's 70%, this upper 30% isn't static. It's constantly being churned. People are being added and removed at a ridiculous rate. And in your state, those numbers have changed in the last 4 years, 50% on average in your state. And so a county might have only grown 1 or 2% in population, but their voter rolls have changed 50%. And the clerks, they're like, how can that be, Dr. Frank? I didn't add 50% new names to my voter rolls. And I say, you're right, you didn't. It's happening in that central database outside of your control. And they say, well, how do you know? And I say, I got a copy of your voter rolls from 2020. Here's a copy of your voter rolls from 2022. By the way, 2020, that's the one Mr. Lindell bought. And I've got multiple copies, and I can show you every name that's been added and removed for the last 4 years. And I give them those lists. And when I show those to sheriffs, for example, they'll look at that and like, who are these people? We don't even know who these people are. Right. In other words, you're not in control. So I show the registrars right off the bat that they're not in control of their own voter rolls. So that's a big deal because that's controlling which ballots you're going to count. Now the other thing, and I always mention this because people don't understand this. I love Mr. Lindell. He's a true American hero. He's put everything on the line. He focuses a lot on the machines and talks a lot about the machines, and he should, because he has electronic evidence showing that the machines are manipulating things. But just getting rid of the machines doesn't fix the problem. So I always show this to people. I say, look, it doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. It doesn't matter how many times you count these. What matters is how many of the bills are counterfeit. It doesn't matter if you count the ballots and recount the ballots What matters is, are they the real ballots from the real voters? So hand counting, you can count these by hand. Hand counting is part of the solution, but it's not the solution, right? But it's important we learn to do hand counting because that's going to be where we're going. We're going to be taking the solution. The solution is to go back to local control. And so I've written this little brochure, I call it 7 Steps for Taking Back Our Elections. The solution to all these possible ways of cheating is to bring it back under your local eyes, where you can see every part of the process. I like what Bob said. He says transparency, or no, it was Susan said that transparency is the first thing she listed as one of the biggest problems. If you want to know if your elections are secure, how could you possibly know? How could you possibly check it out? Your state locks you out of the whole process. They charge you $30,000, $38,000 to get your voter rolls. They won't let you look inside the machines. Your own registrars can't even look inside the machines. You're giving away, you're just totally trusting somebody else to run your election. And that's stupid. Stop doing that. All right, and I've got a strategy for that. Okay. All right, so now I've done this for every one of, I'm going to talk about voting, but let's just skip that for today because I got a short amount of time. I've done this for every county in your state. I can show you how many people are registered in every county month by month since 2002. Yes, I'm a geek. Yes, I spend a lot of time downloading data. Okay? But why did I do this? I wanted to show you every county in the state of Alabama. Now, you'll notice that there's an interesting pattern here in there. And the problem is the big counties make it hard to see the small counties. So I'm going to put it all on the same scale. I'm going to put it on a percent scale so you can look at every county at the same time. And you'll notice that there's a lot of similarity in every county voter rolls, isn't there? Huh. Does that mean every clerk or every registrar is sitting there in their office at the same time doing the same things? No. And you'll notice that there's small little variations and little wiggles that are a little bit different county to county. Well, sure, that's the activity of the local registrar. But you'll notice that 90% or more of the change is not being done by the local registrar. It's being done by a central system. So that's the first thing that I just like to see people to see. Look, here's evidence your rolls are not into local control. By the way, how come nobody else has ever made that graph before? Because that took me 2 days of downloading and a day to work it. It's a lot of work. It's hard to investigate this stuff. It's a complicated system. I like what Suzanne said. It takes a technical degree to look into this stuff. It's a lot of work. So I could show you the voter turnout for every county. And, you know, this is presidential midterm every 2 years since, 1982 or something like that up to present. And the problem is it's hard to see the small counties because of the big counties. But you notice if I put them on a percent scale, in the 80s and 90s, your turnouts in your counties were random, and now your turnouts are totally predictable, which is why I could predict every county in a state if I just looked at one of them. And that is empirical, simple. See what I did? I took a lot of data and I made a simple way for you to see. There's central control. It's not random. Your elections are not random anymore, and there are algorithms that control that. And we could talk about that. And in the early days, I talked about that. But now I brought up Shelby because we're in Shelby County today, and I just wanted to see you're no exception.
You're in Jefferson.
I'm in Jefferson County?
A lot of Shelby County people here. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, and I've got graphs for every county, and I was just showing the contrast isn't good enough on these projectors to see a lot of the information on there. But the point is I can show you your population in every county. I can show you what the registration by age is. This is by age in every county, and I can show you how many people voted by age in every county, and that's completely predictable. So it's not just the total number of ballots that I can predict. I can also predict how many people of every age vote. And how did I find that? I explore lots of variables to figure out what's and then that's how I back engineered how they were cheating in the elections. And Patrick Burns says I reverse engineered the elections. So that's how I did it. Anyway, I just wanted you to see that I've done this for every county in the state. Every county in the state has the same thing. Every county in the state has too many people voting. I can predict every state, every county, Madison, 0.995. Elmore, same pattern. There's too many people in the rolls. I can predict 0.997. It's crazy. I shouldn't be able to predict your county so well. I could go on and on. This graph, these graphs aren't really working too well. But you can look at them online. Even Lee County, I guess you have a university there, obviously, because there's a lot of young people. That blue line is your population. The point is, I can predict all your counties because they're centrally controlled. Now let me just show you one more thing, and then I want to get to the solution. So just so you know how you measure up. I loved what Suzanne did. She described around the country how much the voter rolls are. I live in Ohio. You want the voter rolls for Ohio? You go online and click, and they're yours for free. You go to Florida, you want the voter rolls? You go online and click. They're free. You just download them. You can the history for 20 years of every person who has ever voted in the state's recorded there, and you can download it and examine it, and you can audit your own elections. But in your state, they hide it. Here's why they hide it from you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a two-axis graph. Across the bottom here, this is going to be the percent of the voting age people, the voting eligible people, citizens over 18 in a state, because I'm going to show you all the states. On this axis is the percent of the people that are registered. And then on this axis, I'm going to show you the percent of the people who voted. And this is another really important principle. And the party is duped by this. The Republican Party, when they quote statistics, they always report them to you as percentages. Did you notice? They always say, what's the percent of the registered voters who voted? But if your voter rolls are inflated, that's a meaningless number, isn't it? And so I'm using the percentage of voting age population that's voting. And I can show you the whole state. Now, if anything is above 90%, it's a very dirty voter rolls. Remember I told you it should be about 70%. So if anything is above 90%, it's very dirty. And of course, if you have more than 100% registered, that's just stupid, right? Because you can't have more than 100% of your people. Oh, so Suzanne is pointing out the fact that this interesting little handout she gave everybody has this graph on the back for you. So if you want to, you can see, and she's cut to the chase. She's circled the fact that there are 9 states that have more people in the voter rolls than people, and guess where you are? You're right there, Alabama, right down there. You guys have more people registered than you have people. So you have really dirty voter rolls. You're among the worst in the country. Now, there's one state, here's the rest of the country. There's one state that's particularly clean, and that's Wyoming. And the reason they have clean voter rolls is because they have a law that says if you miss an election, they take you off the rolls. It's that simple. Now, that doesn't mean you can't vote the next time. It just means that you have to bring your ID and proof of citizenship and prove who you are to vote again. And so I would say that's a little hyper clean. They're a little too aggressive. I would like at least one forgiveness. So I would say that this green area, and you'll see that in the chart, that's where I think ideal registration and voting should be, right in there. But so you notice the whole country's a mess. And there's a whole story behind why the whole country's a mess. It basically has to do with the federal government getting involved. Imagine that. Government gets involved and it makes a mess, but that's another thing. All right. So I want to describe this idea to you of churn. I say that a county has 100 people in it, and 10 people move out and 10 move in. So that would be 20 changes, potential changes to your voter rolls. 100 people, 10 move out, 10 move in. That's a total of 20 changes. That's what we call a 20% churn. So your rolls would have churned 20%. That's an important idea. And because the rolls are churning, when we're analyzing the voter rolls, we don't want to just look at the most recent copy of the voter rolls. We need to look at previous copies and put it all together. So that's why when I said to you a minute ago, 50% churn is the average for your state. Every one of your counties, the rolls are churning in the last 4 years, 50%. They've added and removed people to that extent. So what I did is yes, I'll come back to that. I'm going to show you some data that Susanna and I have been working on. And what we like to do is we like to set up a local team. It's one thing for you to go back to your friends after today and say, you know, Dr. Frank today said this, and Dr. Frank said that, and Mike Lindell says this, and Trump says that. That's one way to approach it. Another way to approach it is to say, I looked at my own voter rolls, and guess what I saw? You've knocked on the doors, and you said, wow, these are dirty voter rolls. That's a completely different thing, isn't it? Or if you were to say, gee, this is for Shelby County. I've got 4 copies of your voter rolls and how many people were in each copy of the voter rolls. Looks like you had about 160,000 people in the voter rolls in 2020, and in 2025 you have 178. Your population grew 5%, but your rolls churned 46%. Okay? So, in other words, your population isn't changing that much, but your rolls are massively changing compared to the actual population. Well, who's doing that? It ain't the registrar. It's the state system that's automatically adding and removing people. And furthermore, 1 in 7 of the people who voted in 2020 in Shelby County, it's down here, it's hard to see on the screen, 1 in 7 of them are no longer in the rolls. So the whole point of the churn is they're constantly putting new people in the rolls who are not real voters. Then nefarious actors are casting ballots using those names, and then the state system's constantly cleaning up afterwards. So it's sort of like on the old Gunsmoke episodes when the posse's chasing the bank robber. Gunsmoke, they're chasing the bank robber out of town. What does he do? He hops off of his horse, he takes a branch and he dusts the ground behind him to cover his trail. What's happening is that churning in your rolls is constantly cleaning out the fraud. So a lot of people say, well, geez, Dr. Frank, we're looking for fraud in our voter rolls. Well, if you're looking at only the most recent copy, you're too late. It's already been cleaned up. It's already been churned up. So that's why we do this. We give these to you. We give you a master copy where we've remerged. We've taken everybody who's been removed and we put them all back in. So now you can see a master list at every address, and that helps you to find fraud. And then we give you the list of everybody who was added and who was removed, so you can investigate. Now, why are we doing that? We're doing that because you need harm. What do I mean by that? So, I love Susan, but let's pretend I punch her in the nose, okay? And then Becky says, that's not good. I'm suing you, Dr. Frank. I'm taking you to court. So she takes me to court, and the judge, what is the judge going to say? The judge is going to say, Becky, you were not harmed. You don't have standing. I'm throwing this case out. Okay? Who can take me to court? The person who was harmed. Susan can take me to court. She was harmed. So one of the problems we run into around the country is a lot of people go and complain to the local courts. Oh, our machines are online. The judge says, were you harmed? Case dismissed. No standing. A lot of the election integrity work that's taken place across the country, people are very upset about it, and they're not wrong, but they don't have standing because they don't have any harm. They haven't shown any harm. What I'm doing, and what this team will do, if you'll team up with us, we'll set you up to find the harm. What is the harm? Actual fraud cases in your own community. And that's happening in multiple ways, but the most common way is through your NGOs who stuff ballots using that credit line that's in your voter rolls. They get paid, these non-government organizations get paid money. They get grant money to actually scrape up these ballots and get them turned in and get people to vote who aren't real voters. It's a problem, especially in your rest homes here. I've noticed you've got a huge problem there. People are illegally harvesting those ballots, but that's a whole other thing. We can take you down that road. The point is, I want you to see that this is real, and we have the ability to give you the evidence that you need to actually investigate and get actual harm. Now, let me jump back to my presentation. I just wanted you to see those data. I'm not making this up. If you're expecting the legislature to fix things, let me just show you the Congress right now. This is from the Freedom Index is where I got these data. These are for the United States Congress. If a congressperson never votes consistently with the Constitution, they're over here on the left, 0%. If a congressperson always votes consistent with the Constitution, they get a 100% rating. And the red dots are Republicans and the blue dots are Democrats. And so you'll notice that we've got some Republicans in Congress that are defenders of the Constitution. But there are a lot of compromised ones, communists in disguise and communists that we have, okay, in our legislature who are not defending. And there's Alabama for you. So I'm hoping that the guys in the back of the room are these guys and not these guys, okay? So what's happened is a lot of times the legislators, you don't even know how they vote. Are you the government or not? If you're the government and these are your representatives, you should be tracking how they vote. Your own legislators are compromised. And if you're expecting them to fix the problem, I think you got another thing coming. I have learned nationally, doesn't matter how much evidence you show, nothing's going to happen. You have to first find harm. Prove that the system is harming you. How is it harming you? Let me talk about that for a second. So, there's a good metaphor. Right here. Sorry, I was a little... I changed what I was going to do at the last minute, so I'm a little disorganized. Here we go. We're upside down. Let me tell you this story. So in New Mexico a couple years ago, there was a school shooting, and Governor Grisham said, we're going to put a temporary ban on carrying guns in public because of the school shooting. Now, that's unconstitutional in that state because they have the right to open carry. So the next day, sheriff stood up and said, we're not going to enforce that law in our state, in our county, because they're the constitutional officer for that county, and they can say, we're not going to enforce that. We're going to defend the constitutional rights of our citizens. It's like I was in Michigan recently, and a young man, 18-year-old, I talked to Andrew a minute ago, he's going to be a firefighter, thank you for service. But I talked to a young man in Michigan, and he said he was going to be a policeman. I said, why would you want to be a policeman? A policeman enforces the mayor's will on the people. Wouldn't you rather be a sheriff? A sheriff is the one who swears an oath to defend the constitutional rights of their citizens. Wouldn't you rather be that? 3 days later, he came to one of my presentations. He came up to me all proud, and he says, I signed up for sheriff school. I'm going to be a sheriff. Sheriffs are the ones who interpose and defend the constitutional rights of the citizens. So anyway, this sheriff stood up and said, I'm not going to enforce this unconstitutional ban against my citizens. The next day, 72 more sheriffs stood up and said, we're not going to do that as well. But the real moment, the real beautiful moment wasn't the fact that the sheriffs were willing to defend the people. The beautiful moment was that a week later, and I just happened to be there, I always seem to be in the right place at the right time. God's got an amazing, he's outside of time and space, so he can arrange these things. But anyway, I was there, and 50 of us put on 45s and stood on the Capitol steps in New Mexico and said to the governor, here we are, governor, come and take them. Okay? In other words, the people nullified an unconstitutional order. Does this make sense? Okay. We didn't win because the sheriff stood up. We won because the people stood up. Okay, you follow me? So now, if you make a team in your town, we call it a 7 steps team. If you'll make a team, set up a team, and we can gather evidence that proves that there's fraud in your election because of the system that the state is imposing on you, then you don't have to comply with that system anymore because that system is disenfranchising you from your constitutional rights. Every one of those ballots that's cast fraudulently in your election is nullifying a real ballot from a real citizen in your community. Or at the minimum, it's diluting so it's less than one man per one vote. So that is a violation of your, forgive me, Chris Ann Hall, constitutional rights. It's a violation because you have a constitutional right to one man, one vote in this state. Every fraudulent ballot is depriving you of that and diluting your vote. So guess what? You've now been harmed. Now you have standing. So if the state comes after you and says, well, you still have to do what we say, you're going to say, pound sand, baby. We're not, come and take it. The thing is confusing. It's hard for us. I'm trying to change how you think a little bit. When the government says we're going to come collect your guns, what do you tell them? Which end you want first, baby? Right? Come and take them. We're not going to give them to you, right? Pound salt. We're not going to give you our guns. But when the state comes along and says, give us your ballots, you turn them over without a fight. What is wrong with you? Your ballots are how you defend your gun rights. Your ballots are how you defend your children in your schools and your local community and your property. You're giving away the very thing that is your power to defend yourself. So all you have to do is show that the election system that the state is imposing upon you is disenfranchising your community from your constitutional rights, and then you don't have to comply anymore. And the sheriff can stand with you and say, hey, I'm going to interpose on behalf of that. You don't want to wear masks? Fine, I won't enforce it. I'm not going to let them collect your guns. I'm not going to let them take your ballots either. You see how that works? It's the same principle. Now, I've been doing this for a while, so I've learned some lessons. One of the lessons is, if one beautiful county like Coffee County stood up and said, we don't like this system, we're not going to comply, the state's going to come down on them like a load of bricks. You brought up the hand counting thing in Linda Rance, and in Missouri, they did that. They said, we're not going to use the state system, we're going to do hand counting. One county. What happened to that county? They got sued by the state, and the state piles on. It's just like when you're in a war. When you're in a war, you don't just send one sniper against the enemy. You have to organize a whole war strategy and launch an offensive. If you just send one at a time, you're going to lose. You've got to have a good strategy. So I like Coffee County. Good people. I met with your sheriff. Good guy. Good county leaders. Something tells me that Coffee County is going to be one of the counties in your state that's going to tell the government, pound sand. We're counting our own ballots. Thank you very much. And we're not going to use your stupid system. When I showed your county leaders how much your rolls were churning, they had no idea. They were shocked by that. And guess what? I want 6 counties in Alabama. Let's get 6 counties to stand together, not just one, and say, we're not going to comply with this unconstitutional system anymore. Here's the evidence which shows that it's violating our constitutional rights. We refuse to comply. That's what it's going to take. And we've had some successes around the country. Shasta County, Northern California, 75,000 voters. They're running their own elections. Bob mentioned how they do hand counting under the cameras. All that stuff is being done totally in a transparent way now in that county, 75,000. Wait a minute, Dr. Frank. How did you get a California county to do this? California, that's like communism central. How are you successful out there? You know why I'm successful in California? It's not just the only place. It's because those people are under communism. They're under tyranny. And so they're awake. Their beehive has been kicked. All I have to do is go in those communities and show them how to find the fraud and get them energized and organized. And they are standing up to the state. Huntington Beach, 400,000 population there in Orange County, Southern California. Starting in 2026, they're running all of their own elections. Locally, single day, signature, photo ID, hand counting. How did you get that, Dr. Frank? In that situation, all I had to do was get them to read their own laws. Because they're a charter city. And right in their own charter that the state of California signed off on, it says that they can run their own elections. So they are. And the state sued them, of course, but they survived. They prevailed. So Huntington Beach, starting in 2026, I've been coaching them. Anyway, my point is, most of those victories have been one county at a time, and it's an uphill battle, and it's hard, and the state doesn't like it. The state doesn't willingly relinquish power easily. So that's why I want 6 counties. I was in northern Wisconsin, and I spoke at a bar, a tavern. And there were about 150 people there. I like bars and taverns. People are in good moods. In 1776, where was the revolution? In bars and taverns. Guess what? We're in a revolution now. This is it. This is this moment right now in our country. This is it. So I was there. But anyway, at the end of the talk, these people were coming up. They do selfies with me and ask me questions. I love that period of time. I like the hugs and everything. This beautiful lady came up to me and her husband, older lady, and she put her hand on my shoulder and she says, Dr. Frank, I want to pray for you. Okay. I love it when people pray for me. And her husband put his hand on my shoulder. But little did I know, this is a Baptist church. She was a Pentecostal. And she started praying, and she was loud. She started getting louder and louder and louder. And after 3 or 4 minutes, everybody in the whole tavern was quiet. And everybody was listening to this prayer. And people were coming forward. It was like an altar call, you know. And we like they were all laying hands on me. It was a wonderful moment. I loved every second of that. And she was wrapping up her prayer, and she says, "Hey, thank you, Lord, for giving us Dr. Frank, and that he's fighting the evil Goliath of government corruption and election fraud. And Lord, we just thank you for giving him such a big slingshot to fight Goliath with. And Lord, we just pray that you give him really big stones." She said that in a tavern, right? And she just kept on, but it's a real prayer, and everybody's like involved, so nobody wants to laugh, right? But it's funny, but nobody wants to, so it's like we're all stifling our laughter, and she wraps up her prayer, in Jesus' name, amen. And she opens her eyes, and we all have funny looking faces, because we're all contorted, trying to not laugh. It was very funny. And she looks at me kind of confused, and I said, you just prayed and asked God to give me really big stones. And the whole place just roared in laughter, and she turned beet red as the tablecloth. It was the cutest thing ever. But it made me think about this story in a whole new way with David and Goliath. Because you remember when David went to the battlefield, he didn't go there originally to fight Goliath. He went there to bring lunch to his brothers and take information back to his father on what was going on. And he goes there, and what does he find? There's a big oaf out in the field insulting their God, insulting their nation. And he goes to his brothers and he says, what's up? Get out there and take care of business. And what did his brothers tell him? Go back to the sheep. Go back to the sheep. That's what they said. But he didn't listen. And he went out there and he stood in front of Goliath, and I love what he said. He didn't go out there and say, I'm going to whip your butt. He said, battle is the Lord's. The battle is the Lord's, and today God's going to deliver you into my hands. He throws the stone, down goes Goliath. He cuts the head off of Goliath. And then the Bible says, then the children of Israel rose up and chased the Philistines out of the land. Okay, what did it take? One person to stand. I'm asking for 6 counties. Okay, and what will happen is when the counties start standing, other people will join in. We just need that one sheriff to stand. We just need those few counties to stand, and the other counties will join in, because once they realize how much money they're going to save, 6-1 on their elections, once they realize that their elections are being stolen from them, they're going to be mad. They're going to want to fix that. I know it's scary. The state's big and ugly compared to us. It's spooky, but we got to find our stones. We've got to engage this battle. And it can't just be one of you, because one of you is nutty. You know, one person is nutty, a fruitcake. 2 people are just a fruitcake with a friend. We got to have 50 people. We got to have 50 people. So we're putting together these teams right now across the state. We are putting together teams in as many counties as we can, but I'm going for a target of 6 before we make our stand. And there'll be different kinds of counties. There'll be counties that stand, the lead counties, I call those. They're like the first wave in Normandy. And then there'll be a second group of counties where maybe the leaders of the county weren't necessarily on board, but there'll be teams in those counties that say, you know what, we have the same problem in our county. Here's some more fraud here. In other words, we want to make a statewide movement. Because like President Trump said, President Trump is leading a movement. He knows he can't just pass an executive order and fix this problem. And I've got his tweet right here. I had it all ready and then I lost my way. Sorry, I was having too much fun. I'll just tell you. He posted I put it up here. It's worth seeing. Here it is. He put up a tweet. This is the longest tweet I've ever seen from this guy. It's like an essay. He says, this was in August. He says, I'm going to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots. And also, while we're at it, highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines, which cost 10 times more, 6 times more than accurate and sophisticated watermark paper, blah, blah, blah. I could read this whole thing. But you notice that Trump didn't say, I'm going to sign an executive order to do this. He said, I'm going to lead a movement to do this. That is what the 7 steps are all about. The 7 steps are about you building a movement in your own community that then we get multiple communities to stand together, and that leads a movement in your state. And like General Flynn says, local action is how we have national impact. Can you imagine if Alabama really was the gold standard? Can you imagine if you guys stood up and led the way? You'd be joining other states like Oregon. Oregon right now is about to stand. We got a whole bunch of counties there. You know, there's like these mountain range down the middle of Oregon called the Cascades. And 13 of the counties to the east of the Cascades have already stood together and said, we want to leave the state of Oregon. We want to join Idaho. They're all ready to stand against the state. I've been organizing them. We have multiple states doing this right now. But I'd like you guys to be first. but you're a little behind, so catch up. Let's get some more of these counties connected in and get going. And how about if I stop there? It looks like I have about 7 minutes left. Maybe I have time for a question or two. So thank you very much. Which states should we go after? So which counties? When I first started this work, I was going to the big blue counties because that's where the problem is the worst. But that's like attacking Berlin on the first day. That's a bad strategy. We got to get to Normandy. We got to build a beachhead. So the right counties to go to are Coffee, Cullman, small red counties where we have good leadership and good sheriffs, and I've met with several of these people. We're going to organize several small counties. That's the low-hanging fruit. Let's get them organized first. So did I answer your question?
Yes, one more. How can we get Tina Peters out of jail?
Yeah, Tina Peters, she's the Mesa County clerk who I met with in April of 2021, and we backed up all of her machines, and she's in prison now because of that. And when we told President Trump this in February, after CPAC, Mr. Lindell went into the Oval Office, and when Trump found out she was in prison, they know each other very well, because I know, because we arranged that. Trump said, he looked at his 6 attorneys in the office and he says, get her out. So the very next week, the Department of Justice launched an investigation and a probe into lawfare in the state of Colorado. And I don't know if you've noticed, but also Trump is putting the screws to Colorado in other ways. He moved Space Force from there to Alabama, right? Right. So he's applying the federal pressure he's able to do, but then also they're launching a federal lawsuit in her state on election fraud. It needs to be a federal lawsuit because that gives him jurisdiction, and then they'll bring her in as a witness, then they can take her out on witness protection, federal witness protection. Because right now she's convicted under state statutes, and so he doesn't have jurisdiction. So how about that for a... That's the strategy anyway. We'll have to see because, in war, battle plans are always changing, right? No battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. The legislators don't want to fix it. The party doesn't want to fix it. So it doesn't matter what evidence I show them, they're going to resist that. I could tell you several stories. I've been banned from Oklahoma by the legislature, okay? Which is Republican majority. That's a red state. I was invited there by the AG, John Connor. And I stayed in his house. His wife cooked me eggs for breakfast, okay? He arranged a special private meeting for me to talk to the legislature. They actually passed a law forbidding me from coming near any of the voting places because I have a sensor I can tell you when your machines are online. And they don't like me. They've banned me from the state. So I don't have any hope in going to your legislators to fix the problem. I have hope in the people getting organized and starting the parade that the legislators join. Does that make sense? Because I can tell you, I could talk for hours since I've been doing this every day about other situations in other states. Kansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Missouri. I was even invited by the Missouri legislature as a special friend of Missouri and given a special honor on the House floor. Then they kicked me out of every committee. But anyway, go ahead.
Hey, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
I have a very general question. I have tried to keep track of all of the election fraud that would be reported in different ways since 2020, whether it was Rudy Giuliani in the beginning, who supposedly had 1,000 witnesses, and then he was supposedly debunked and then destroyed. But is there ever been a comprehensive documentation, accumulation of all of the fraud that occurred? Because it's massive, but the general public doesn't want to believe it. And I've just never seen it really summarized. You hear about this county and in Detroit and so on and so forth, but there just seems to be a massive amount of fraud that went on, either with the the mail-in ballots and the shutting down the voting at 10 o'clock and Atlanta and in Detroit and all over. So I just have never seen a comprehensive report or whatever accounting for all of the...
Multiple states have teams like this have put together reports in their states. About about 14 reports were done in 2021 documenting. And I want you to realize Trump had all the evidence he needed in December of 2020. What Trump didn't have was a single legislature that would decertify their election, which is why I was working so hard in Pennsylvania at the beginning, because all Trump needed was one state to decertify, and he would have decertified the entire election. And he actually passed an executive order. It's his 83rd executive order in his first term that gives the president the executive authority to nullify any election that has foreign interference, which speaks to the 2026 issue that Bob brought up. I don't know if you noticed, but back in June, Kash Patel released evidence that there were 1 million fake driver's licenses and 1 million fake ballots corresponding to those 1 million fake driver's licenses seized outside of Detroit. And that's just one example. So remember, I told you that the way they're cheating the elections isn't by flipping ballots. The way they're cheating elections is by stuffing ballots. And what they're doing is they're using the machines to know where you stand. Let's say you're behind an election 8 to 10 and you want to be ahead. You just look up 4 people that haven't voted and you stuff 4 ballots for them. That's how you take the election. That's how you take back control. And so that's the way. So I appreciate your question. You're saying, gee, how come there aren't court cases? Well, there are, and I've been in multiple of them. They're documented. They're online. The 156,000 that were added to the voter rolls in Michigan. You've all seen that graph, right? It goes like this, and then it jumps up at 11 o'clock. That's 156,000 not flipped votes. That's 156,000 new voters that were added to the voter rolls from 10:59 and 11 o'clock. And a ballot was cast for every one of those. And then 4 hours later, we had the videotape, the truck backing up to the building with 156,000 ballots all shrink wrapped and ready to count, ready to back up the electronic count. So we have massive amounts of evidence.
And I wish it could be compiled to where it could be presented to the like a book even. That just
Well, there are tons of books. I've got books. Somebody gave me a book here. And if you go to the Cause of America website, there's a lot compiled there. The problem is too many of you are listening to Fox News. And too many of you listen and those networks deliberately will not talk about any of this because they're afraid of getting sued. And that's the problem. And so that's why people don't know. You guys have this serious problem in your state. That's the sort of thing, and yet your media didn't cover it. How come you don't know that there's fraud going on in your own state? Because the powers that be, the establishment that is, doesn't want you to question the integrity of the elections because it keeps them in power. Anyway, I'm rambling on now, but I think that was pretty good. Yeah? Thank you. Thank you.